For our next scientific session, I invite Professor Devdatta Basu for his talk on multiple myeloma, diagnostic criteria and the role of a pathologist. I invite Professor Tejinder Singh sir and Dr. Anup Srivastav sir to chair the session.
Department of Pathology at JIPMER, and he has been from undergraduate days one of our best students, very studious, but he is also involved in many extracurricular activities, whether it is drama, whether it is music, whether it is singing, and he is a darling of JIPMER as far as that part is also concerned. He has maintained his academic activities, and more so after becoming a professor. So today he is going to tell us about the recent concepts of diagnosis of multiple myeloma. Dr. Basu, please.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. I am not a singer, by the way. Okay. All right. The title, as you would see, is slightly tweaked to make it a bit interesting, because myeloma is a very old disease. It's not changing. Okay, all of you, I'm sure, have seen slides or marrows of myeloma, right? Postgraduates, residents, you would be. It's one of the. If you get a slide with florid myeloma, it's one of the easy slides to identify. But let's start at the very beginning of how it is. The year is 1844, and a paper in the medical and surgical transcriptions of London described the case of a lady called Sarah Newberry with these illustrations also. She was a lady who was brought to the hospital by her husband in her arms, carried in her arms, and when she was put on the bed, that process of transferring her from her home to the hospital resulted in multiple fractures. And at autopsy, the description was morbid action of blood vessels in which the earthy matter of the bone is absorbed and thrown out by the kidneys in the urine. This was the description in 1844 of a case of what was then later on diagnosed as myeloma. We also had this very unusual case of Thomas Alexander Macbean, who was basically a tradesman, and the doctor he went to was McIntyre. He basically had fatigue and has noted that his body linen was stiffened by his urine, because there was so much of protein that was coming out of his urine that happened. And also at autopsy, soft, brittle, readily fractured ribs and a gelatinous substance of blood red color and aqueous feel was found in the bone. And if you can read this, the cause of death was atrophy from albuminuria. That was what was diagnosed. So this became the Macbean's disease and McIntyre's albuminuria, and that urine was studied by Robert Benz-Jones into what we now know as the Benz-Jones protein, and on those years itself it was found that on heating, this dissolved by addition of nitric acid but reappeared after cooling. This precipitate underwent complete solution on the application of heat but consolidated on cooling, and so that was how it was identified. Autopsy findings were the ribs crumbled under the heel of a scalpel, and at this time in 1846, one paper came out which described the plasma cells as they were identified under the microscope. So this name of the disease also changed. It was once upon a time called the Kohler disease, which was identified as skeletal pain, albuminuria, pallor, anemia, and urine protein. So most of what we know as the Crab findings were described way back then. This history went on. Weber identified the X-rays in diagnosis, postulated the Benz-Jones protein is produced in the marrow. Multiple myeloma arose from plasma cells was identified way back in 1900, and Longsworth's description of the electrophoresis came later. It's raining, I guess. Wow. So this is the history. I will not go so much into the details of the history further down the road. So what was then became now. Identify her. Bombay dying, and that was her. She's a myeloma survivor, by the way. So what is myeloma? It's a plasma cell dyscrasia characterized by a monoclonal protein in the serum or urine with a myeloma defining event as we know as CRAB, and the CRAB stands for hypercalcemia with a calcium more than 11, renal insufficiency, creatinine more than 2, anemia, hemoglobin less than 10, and bone lesions, one or more osteolytic lesions detected on radiography, CT or PET-CT, in plain X-rays as well. WHO classifies myeloma, plasma cell diseases into all these types: plasma cell myeloma with its variants, plasmacytoma, that's solitary or extramedullary, immunoglobulin deposition disease, osteosclerotic myeloma or POEMS, as Sir just now referred to, then lymphoplasmacytic lymphoma or Waldenstrom, and the heavy chain diseases. So basically we have malignancy of terminally differentiated plasma cells. I will not go into the, apart from the plasma cell neoplasia, I will not discuss the rest of it for the matter of time. Just let's to clarify a few entities of what is MGUS, what do we understand by smoldering myeloma, what do we understand by plasma cell myeloma in the next few sessions. Most of the plasma cell dyscrasias belong to the IgG fraction. We have IgA, IgM, IgD and ER are very, very rare conditions. Primary light chain myeloma, kappa or lambda, is about 1 to 2. We have 1 to 2% of what we call as non-secretory. We can also have a biclonal or triclonal myelomas. It's basically an abnormal proliferation of malignant plasma cells with certain genetic genomic instability on certain genetic conditions, which we will discuss in a while. It progresses from a normal cell to a monoclonal gammopathy and most of the time goes into a myeloma. Way back in 1975, there were these criteria that was given as Salmon-Dury. It lasted for quite a lot of years. In fact, all through my residency, we were basing our diagnosis on Salmon-Dury classification. It had a major diagnostic criteria of biopsy plus proven plasmacytoma, marrow more than 30%, and elevated monoclonal immunoglobulin levels. Certain minor criteria of 10 to 30%, minor monoclonal elevation, osteopenia or lytic lesions, and low antibodies levels. These were the minor criteria. It has got refined now, but still remember that bone marrow involvement, that time clonality assessment was not so easily done, so now it has changed over through the years. In 2003 came this International Myeloma Working Group, where again more or less it was similar, and the CRAB definitions came up at this point of time, and then finally was this reason that we realized that we needed to revise the criteria to some extent. Unlike other myelomas, the definition of myeloma is clinico-pathological and needs overt clinical manifestation of serious end organ damage before diagnosis is made. This was the thought that felt that unless, myeloma all these years can be diagnosed only when there is an end organ damage. Isn't there a role for earlier diagnosis, having some more criteria which would be able to diagnose the disease before it leads on to overt end organ damage? So that was the basic rationale why we wanted to revise the criteria. Treatment decisions are based upon CRAB features, not on the actual tumor burden that is going on in the marrow, and patients therefore cannot get early therapy to prevent organ damage. Identification of myeloma with limited organ damage versus smoldering myeloma with high risk of progression was the type of the need to diagnose that group of diseases which are not yet overt. And of course, treatment options have greatly improved, and data do show that early intervention in high-risk asymptomatic patients can extend survival. So this was, again, if you look at these two articles that came out subsequently and that was reviewed, a cohort of smoldering myeloma patients were identified and noted that only 2% of that whole lot had a bone marrow plasma cell of 60% or greater, and this group progressed rapidly to myeloma. Similarly, of the 651 patients of smoldering multiple myeloma, 21 or 3% had a plasma cell of 6% or 60% or greater, and 95 of these progressed to multiple myeloma within 2 days. So it was identified that there is possibly a group of smoldering myeloma who do not clinically manifest, but if you can identify them, you will be able to identify the disease early. And this formed the basis of the entire revision of multiple myeloma by Rajkumar, which came up. So this was the first article, and this is the, I hope all of you have gone through this and use it for your diagnostic criteria of thing. And Vincent Rajkumar is proud to say that he is a CMC product, an Indian who has done a considerable amount of work in myeloma. So what is the current diagnostic criteria? MGUS, all the three criteria must be met. serum monoclonal protein of less than 30 grams per liter, clonal bone marrow plasma cells less than 10%, and absence of an end organ damage. Okay. MGUS is further classified into three, depending on the monoclonal protein that is elevated. The non-IgM MGUS, this is the one that progresses to myeloma, but with a low percentage of 1% per year. IgM MGUS is the one that is a prelude to Waldenstrom, with a progression about 1.5% per year. Light chain MGUS is progression to a light chain myeloma, and this is one of the benignest. I mean, this hardly ever transforms into myeloma. So this is MGUS. What is smoldering myeloma? Smoldering myeloma is serum monoclonal protein more than equal to 30 grams or urinary monoclonal protein more than equal to 500 milligrams per 24 hours. Clonal plasma cells 10 to 60%, and none of the CRAB criteria still present. Absence of myeloma defining events or amyloidosis. So that's smoldering multiple myeloma. Risk of progression to myeloma in the first 5 years after diagnosis is much higher. Prognostic models have been proposed in smoldering myeloma to look for cytogenetic profiles. This is the revised current myeloma. It looks a bit cluttered and looks a bit complicated, but it is actually not so. If you have identified what is MGUS, what is smoldering, all that, and also you need to know what are the myeloma defining events. These are the myeloma defining events. If you have a clonal bone marrow plasma cells of more than 10%, the word is now clonal. That means you have to identify the clonality, and how do we do it? It can be done either by immunofixation or on the refined biopsy by immunohistochemistry for lambda and kappa restriction. Okay, I'll come to that a bit later. So if there is a clonal, if that is there 10% or a biopsy proven plasmacytoma, any one or more of these CRAB events which we are defined, it's myeloma. So you have the CRAB events and you have a clonal bone marrow involvement of more than 10%. So that's myeloma. However, this is what was added now. I'm coming into this a bit more details. In the absence of the CRAB findings, if you find any one of the three, that is clonal bone marrow plasma cell percentage more than 60%. More than 60% of plasma cells, involved to uninvolved serum free light chain ratio of more than equal to 100. Free light chain ratio between kappa and lambda more than 100, and the involved free light chain must be itself more than 100. Got it? The ratio more than 100, and one of the two, whichever it is, kappa or lambda, should be more than 100. If that is so, it's still a myeloma without any of these events. And the bone lesions was one or more osteolytic lesions on skeletal radiography traditionally. Now, on MRI, if you find more than one focal lesion of more than 5 millimeter, that again becomes myeloma in the absence of any of these findings. These are the things. Okay. So these are the new biomarkers. Clonal bone marrow plasma cells more than equal to 60, involved to uninvolved free light chain ratio more than 100, and more than one focal lesion on MRI, which can pick up more than 5 millimeter. What are the clinical manifestations? This is Wintrob, good old Wintrob's definition. Majority of the patient presents with bone lesions, bone pain, anemia, and this percentage is the one that has renal involvement. However, usually during evaluation for seemingly unrelated, but the commonest unrelated, so-called unrelated, is a renal problem. We have a sizable number of patients who present with chronic kidney disease and turn out to be myeloma. 25% of patients, recurrent infections are the presenting features. Less than 30 years, 2%. I have lost one of my close friends to myeloma when he was around 30s. Okay. Bleeding manifestations, lymphadenopathy, effusions, renal failure of course, and hepatosplenomegaly. In our study, 2 studies that we have done on myeloma, up to 10% of patients have demonstrable hepatosplenomegaly. I'm going to discuss those cases in a while. So what is the role of laboratory investigations? Of course, it's to confirm the diagnosis and categorize, clonality assessment, end organ damage, prognostication, staging, choosing the right therapy, and assessing also the response to therapy. So what are the paraphernalia that we have? We have blood counts, bone marrow, radiology, urine proteins, serum electrophoresis. If serum is not diagnostic enough, do a urine protein electrophoresis, quantitative assays, serum and urine immunofixation electrophoresis, and serum free light chain assay. This is for the diagnostic. Let's look at what is our role as a pathologist. Okay. Well, I always tell my students, look at the slide gross. Don't put it straight under the microscope in high power and oil immersion. Look at it gross, put it under the light, low power, and then go ahead. And that's the typical appearance of peripheral smear, which is rich in proteins. Okay. Of course, these are the trademark plasma cells that you can find. And somewhere that we can help in the peripheral smear is rouleau formation. Identify the rouleau formation, learn to differentiate it from agglutination. They have to be stacks of arrangement. Plasma cells in smear, again, it's important to identify and count the number of plasma cells in your peripheral blood. As you know, the cutoff is 20%. If you have 20% or more, it is considered to be plasma cell leukemia. The recently, again, Vincent Rajkumar has said more than 5% can pip it to a plasma cell leukemia, but that has not yet got validated, but still it is there, this contentious, or 2000 absolute plasma cell count. ESR is elevated. It may not be required routinely, but that it acts as one of the corroborative evidence in a case of myeloma. Sorry. Diagnostic issues, biochemistry is useful. Calcium and creatinine both need to be done. And as you know, serum albumin and beta-2 microglobulin are prognostic markers. I'll again come to it in a while. Monoclonal protein, presence of M protein in serum urine. Okay, I've talked about all this. And how do we go about it? We do the immunoelectrophoresis and immunofixation. We identify the M band, quantify the M protein, and can do an agarose gel or a capillary electrophoresis, densitometry, nephelometric, any of the assessment can be done. And I'm talking mainly of the consensus guidelines that have been given as to how to go about in the diagnosis of immunofixation is the gold standard. You need to immunofix and quantitate the amount of pattern. It has to be performed in all cases, even if there is hypogammaglobulinemia. And you're suspecting seriously that this is myeloma, you should do it. Immunofixation in apparently normal electrophoresis is also useful. If M band is positive, but immunofixation with G, A, or M is negative, only then you go ahead and quantitate D and D. It's not necessary to do an immunofixation for all the three at the same time. Serum free light chain assay is more sensitive. It is detectable in up to 80% of even non-secretory myelomas. It is indicated in diagnosis and very, very useful in monitoring. It's important for monitoring case of myeloma doing a serum free light chain assay. And this ratio helps stratify the high-risk MGUS, solitary myeloma, and solitary plasmacytoma. As I said, more than 100. This is the reference range. Normal ratio for kappa to lambda is 0.26 to 1.65. Just keep it in mind. Anything more than 2 is definitely abnormal, either way. Risk of progression of multiple myeloma in the first 2 years with an FLC ratio of at least 100 was this high. 72 to 100% of patients with an FLC. That's why this 100 has been taken off as a cutoff for diagnosis of myeloma. Radiology, usually lytic lesions, we all have learned about it. MRI, CT, and PET-CT are increasingly being used to detect skeletal disorders, and MRI, the detection of a lytic lesion more than 5 millimeters has been considered as a biomarker. There are future biomarkers, aberrant surface antigens on plasma cells, molecular characterization, cytogenetic 414, 1q amplification, and deletion 17p are definite markers for myeloma with a high bone marrow plasma cell proliferative rate. So much about the entire biochemical and imaging. However, for us, morphological analysis of bone marrow aspirate and refined remain the gold standard for quantifying the volume of plasma cell infiltration and assessing the degree of plasma cell ATPR. It's recommended that we do a 200 cell count in the marrow to assess the exact percentage. Plasma cells occupying at least 1 or 2 high power fields in a trephine biopsy, zoom in on those areas, and presence of light cell restricted aggregates of plasma cells filling in at least one interfatty marrow space improves your diagnostics. So this gives you the confidence. Plasma cells in a triphyine biopsy, if you look, are very scattered and patchily distributed. So look for areas where there are occupying more areas and look for clonality in those areas. It gives you confidence. And whichever it is, do an aspirate, do a count. Next step is do the biopsy, look at the biopsy and again assess the count. Whichever is higher is taken as the actual plasma cell percentage. So indication of bone marrow in case of multiple myeloma. In a suspected case, bone pain, lytic lesions, M protein, renal failure. All it is. In a proven case, the percentage of plasma cells, the pattern of infiltration, clonality, and then finally monitoring response. So all these can be done on the triphyine biopsy or the aspirate. So when we are looking at a bone marrow, few points, is it reactive or is it neoplastic? That's the first thing that we have to look at. MGUS versus smoldering versus myeloma. Look at the percentage. Plasma cell morphology is important. The pattern of infiltration is important. Bone marrow studies are useful in prognosticating, and you can also do your immunohistochemistry on it. So how do we look at reactive versus neoplastic? Lot of causes of reactive plasmacytosis. Kala-Azar, HIV, malignancies, Castleman's, even diabetes and cirrhosis have been described in the list. But in a reactive plasmacytosis, usually the percentage is less than 20%. You don't have very, very florid plasma cells. Plasma cells in a normal bone marrow are present focally scattered around macrophages and capillaries. But perivascular plasma cell collections are not always benign and can be seen in quite a few cases of myeloma. And these are all from a slightly older study, but plasma cell aggregates in patients with reactive plasmacytosis are usually composed of less than 10%, 10 plasma cell in number. So reactive forms on morphology, we have identified the flame cells, the binucleated forms, the Russell bodies, etc., usually indicative of reactive process. An IHC-based study you can do, where again the same thing, kappa and lambda both would be positive in cases of reactive plasma cells. And again, keep that, this thing is important. Plasma cell count. Plasma cell count should be done on 200 cells between aspirate and biopsy, whichever is higher, because aspirates may underestimate. It can underestimate because of its patchy nature. It can underestimate because of the fibrosis. It can underestimate because of your process itself. You may not get a very diluted marrow. Okay, that's how the plasma cells look in an aspirate, and that's how they look in a triphyine. A well-stained section is good enough. In one of our studies on multiple myeloma, we noticed that plasma cells in the aspirate tend to be underestimated. If you can identify this table, on a biopsy, there were so many which were more than 20%, but on an aspirate it was much lesser. 40% of our cases had more than 50% in aspirate, which these are all known cases of myeloma. However, the same more than 50% turned out to be in 71% of the biopsies. So aspirates underestimate because they are nodular, focal, interstitial, and diffuse elsewhere in the same biopsy. And they underestimate because of dilution, focal infiltration, and marrow fibrosis. Plasma cell morphology. Way back in '88, Bartle gave out one very complicated classification of 6 types, and this used to be a very pet question of Sir when we were students as to identify. So we had to remember those 6 types, which were very difficult. Now also it is difficult. It was Marshall-Co, which was the mature ones, small cell type, cleaved cell, polymorphous, asynchronous, plasmablastic. It was difficult to reproduce. So currently we look at what is called as well-differentiated, intermediate, or poorly differentiated. Well-differentiated when there are more than 90% are mature, poorly differentiated when less than 10% appear mature. We also have an entity of plasmablastic myeloma. So that's well-differentiated. Basically, typical look at the chromatin clumping, look at absence of nucleolus, and a prominent HOF that is visible. These are the more immature looking myeloma cells. The chromatin is more diffuse, nucleolus may or may not be visible. Usually still remains HOF, but the HOF is not very prominent in every place. And these are the plasmablastic. Plasmablastic resemble a blast, and with prominent nucleolus, large cells, very high NC ratio, scant cytoplasm, and that. At times you can get these beautiful crystals of immunoglobulins. These are one of our cases where it's almost looking like an ore rod. stacks of rods, but they're all immunoglobulin crystals. So that's how it looks, well differentiated. You can get binucleation. You can get, what are these? If you get prominent intranuclear inclusions, what would you call them? These are the Dutcher bodies. You can get Dutcher bodies in myeloma. Classically, of course, they are seen in Waldenstrom, etc. Slightly more immature appearing, pleomorphic appearing plasma cells. And that's on a trephine biopsy, well differentiated and poorly differentiated. Poorly differentiated often creates confusions. Pattern of involvement is important. Interstitial, focal, mixed, and diffuse. Diffuse pattern has a poor prognosis. That's interstitial. The fat spaces are preserved along with interspersed along with normal hematopoietic cells. You see increased plasma cells. Focal interstitial infiltrates. And you can highlight, this is one usefulness of the immunohistochemistry, highlight these plasma cells in interstitial. These are the nodular pattern of infiltration of plasma cells. Again, another nodule, big nodule of plasma cells in myeloma. And this is the diffuse infiltration. At times, you can get sheets of plasma cells, and the entire marrow is full of plasma cells. Again, we have noticed a considerable amount of plasma cell myeloma has marrow fibrosis, and this has been correlated with the poorly differentiated plasma cell morphology with a shorter median survival time. Amyloidosis, amyloid depositions can be seen in myeloma. Again, good examples of, we have a few cases. So if you compare the trephine biopsy with the clinical stage, plasma cell type, poorly differentiated, and percentage of plasma cells more than 50% correlated well with the clinical staging of plasma cells, of myeloma. Similarly, the pattern of infiltration and presence of mitosis correlated well. This was in one of our early studies. The early studies also demonstrated very well the difference on a Kaplan-Meier curve between the well-differentiated and the poorly differentiated myeloma. The poorly differentiated morphology myeloma had a poor survival time. Immunohistochemistry is useful because it helps us identify the plasma cells, the plasma cell burden, and the pattern of infiltration, monoclonality of plasma cells. Even some studies have shown Ki67 is useful in this. So if you have a slide like this and you want to identify, CD138 is useful. CD38 is also good a marker, but CD38, mind you, also highlights the immature myeloid cells. So at times you may get confused. So CD138 is a good marker. It is elaborated. It's not a specific between neoplastic and reactive. It is elaborated by all myeloma cells. CD38 in one of our cases with diffuse. Immunohistochemistry done on a routine paraffin embedded trephine biopsy works out very well, provided you don't over decalcify it. Establishing clonality is useful with anti-kappa or anti-lambda. It's often quite useful. And this is the profile that has been given to differentiate neoplastic from normal from neoplastic. CD38 is positive in both 138. CD19 is usually positive in normal plasma cells, negative in neoplastic plasma cells. CD20 is positive in less number, but it's not an important. 56 is a good marker for identifying neoplastic plasma cells. It's positive in most of our cases. Cyclin D1, if positive, is indicative of poor prognosis. CD30 or EMA is positive in normal plasma cells. So this is how you differentiate if you have a confusion, whether it's really a neoplastic or a truth. You could use your immunohistochemistry to differentiate the two. Proliferation index correlates very well with the type of myeloma. The poorly differentiated plasmablastic are often very highly proliferative compared to the plasmacytic or the well-differentiated. Other immunohistochemical markers, CD34 can help you do the MVD, not very important. CD56 and cyclin D1 we have tried out was useful in myelomas. Bone marrow trephine combined with immunohistochemistry is superior to bone marrow aspirate in follow-ups. It's again useful, as you know, in monitoring. Many times post-chemotherapy, your aspirate may be diluted, may be not very effective. The biopsy and the immunohistochemical workup helps out. Flow cytometry is now coming up into the picture in myeloma studies. We have a PhD thesis going on. May not be widely available, but it's useful for MRD detection in myeloma, especially with aberrant phenotypes can be useful. Prognosis, staging, and choosing the right therapy. Multiple myeloma is heterogeneous with a low risk versus high risk, and it helps predict life expectancy. Staging then was the typical Dury-Salmon staging system that was going on. Cytogenetic is useful. Cytogenetics 414, 1416, 17p are prognosticated markers on cytogenetics. This is the fish study has shown the what is called the stratification of myeloma and risk adapted based on the karyotyping abnormalities with a standard risk, intermediate risk, and a high risk. High risk are the 17p deletion, 1416, and 1420. There are other prognostic markers that have been useful: advanced stage, poor performance status, high LDH, low platelets. The M protein itself is a good prognostic marker. Cytogenetics, circulating plasma cells, bone marrow plasma cell more than 50 or 6, what we studied was 50%, now they say 60. Plasma cell morphology, plasma cell index is more, FLC ratio is often used. Response assessment is important to do through Benz-Jones protein immunofixation and free light chain. This is where it plays a role in response assessment. Yeah. Just end up with one case. We had a 45-year male. Presentation was with hepatosplenomegaly, pallor, and the provisional diagnosis that came to us was CML. Complete blood counts with hemoglobin about 4, TLC and bicytopenia. Look at the tear dropping and the kind of leukoerythroblastic blood picture that we had. Again, the bone marrow aspirate was not very good, but still showed sheets and sheets of myeloma cells. Aspirate was diluted. Imprint, we got 65% plasma cells. Binucleated, trinucleated, very immature forms were also seen. This was the trephine biopsy, very hypercellular. Again, notice the bony trabeculae. Sir just now talked about the osteopathies. You can pick out the kind of osteoporotic changes that are there in the marrow. Immature looking plasma cells and increased fibrosis. So CD38 and the further workup was positive for myeloma. So this was one myeloma, plasmablastic, with increased WHO grade 2 fibrosis. So myeloma do show fibrosis and at times cause clinical problems. So there is an undergone a paradigm shift in the diagnostic approach and treatment over the years. It can have, mind you, myriad presentations. That's why myeloma is a tricky disease to diagnose, because it has so many other. Just the other day, one of our cases, our director himself said, is myeloma a hematological disease at all? It has such a wide spectrum of presentation. Guidelines are there, which has helped us in early detection, and bone marrow trephine biopsy assesses the exact plasma cell burden. It gives you prognostic information in the form of morphology, percentage, fibrosis pattern. It is useful for follow-up of the cases, and immunohistochemistry does play an important role in identifying plasma cells. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Basu, for giving a very elaborate clinical as well as pathological criteria for diagnosis of multiple myeloma. Any comments, queries? Yes, doctor.
First of all, congratulate Dr. Basu for a nice presentation. There is one query that in your study you have shown that frequency of light chain myeloma is only 1 to 2%. But in BHU we have noticed that it is very high, 50 to 20% are light chain myeloma. That's why in the routine we have, in the myeloma profile, we ask patient or clinician to send the serum as well as urine, 24 hours urine for the urine electrophoresis, second thing, nowadays there are, I think, one article in Laboratory Medicine which I remember, they have done the free light chain assay and they have found that this is not useful in about 30 to 40% cases in monitoring the patient or in the diagnosis of the patient. So I want your opinion. Third thing, that when I was working in BHU, I got two cases. In one case there was a monoclonal peak, and in the urine also there was M peak. And in the bone marrow smear examination there was no plasma cell, but in the bone marrow biopsy there were mostly lymphocyte and mature type of lymphocyte. And in one of the case, after the serum immunoglobulin study and immunofixation, it was in favor of the Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia. But clinically, patient did not had any hepatosplenomegaly or lymphadenopathy. Patient presented with the bone pain. And second case was again having the, I think, one or two lytic lesion, M peak in the serum electrophoresis. In the urine also there was M peak. And in the bone marrow, again, the mature plasma cell were present. There was no evidence of any plasma cell differentiation. In that case, probably immunohistochemistry could not be done. So I want to know that can this type of thing happen, that there are mature type of lymphocyte without any plasma cell differentiation, but with a lytic lesion and urine and M peak in the serum as well as in the urine? And second thing that in the first case, probably it was case of MGUS, which could turn into the Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia. As such, what is the treatment for the MGUS? Whether these patients should be treated or just to follow up?
No, it cannot be. I'll talk of the last cases first. It cannot be MGUS if there is evidence of lytic lesion in the spine. If there is lytic lesion, it cannot be MGUS. It has to be a symptomatic disease, either a myeloma or a Waldenstrom. Myeloma looking like mature lymphocytes. There was, if you look at the classification, one of the types of myeloma was lymphocytes. But when we get myeloma cells or suspected myeloma, lymphocyte like Waldenstrom is the first possibility. And Waldenstrom may not always manifest with hepatosplenomegaly or lymphadenopathy. It can be with features of hyperviscosity and detection of IgM. IgM on the immunofixation, that would be Waldenstrom. The second case that you said had lytic lesions and urine and serum positive, but not on the aspirate. That is quite well known because of the patchy nature of myeloma deposition. And also that is why it is often, many a times it is, the morphologically also they can resemble mature plasma cells. They can resemble mature plasma cells, but we have to do the clonality assay, at least a kappa lambda, and look at it, or immunohistochemically. If it is immunohistochemic or on electrophoresis, skeletal lesions are there, just 10% is the cutoff to label it as plasma cell myeloma. So you can have a low burden myeloma, but clinically or radiologically positive. Isn't that?
In the bone marrow biopsy also, more than 50% cells were of lymphocyte. There was no plasma cell differentiation, and cells were mostly lymphocyte. But
I'll tell you. See, 5 to 10% of multiple myelomas, you will not find plasma cells, but they are plasma cells.
Yes.
Morphology is like that of a lymphocyte. He showed you one picture where he has written standard risk, T1114. The cases with lymphocytic morphology are associated with T1114. While talking of immunohistochemistry, he said some cases are CD20 positive. These are the cases which are CD20, CD138, kappa or lambda positive. These cases are CD56 negative. This we label as lymphocytic variant of multiple myeloma. This is one entity. So don't get disturbed. Now it is a very well known entity of lymphocytic variant of multiple myeloma. Just get T1114 done. And CD20, these are positive. Usually we or many people don't do CD20. But we as a routine do CD20 in all suspected myelomas or lymphoproliferative. So we have been able to pick up 5 to 10% of these cases. Another problem comes, as you mentioned, is Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia. Here we have double population. One of lymphocytic proliferation, the second is of plasma cell proliferation. The plasma cells are clonal. Those are the ones which are secreting IgM. The lymphocytes probably are not secreting IgM. So what happens is, if you do immunohistochemistry on the refined biopsy, you will find sheets of CD20 positive cells which are B cells. You do CD138, you will find 10 to 30% of the cells are also plasma cells, which are either kappa or lambda. But we don't call it Waldenstrom till you demonstrate on immunofixation that the heavy chain is mu type. That is IgM. Once you find that, only then we label these cases as Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia. But there could be a problem if you want to differentiate between lymphocytic variant and Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia. There are problems because everywhere you don't find immunofixation available. Once you have, or if you have immunohistochemistry available, there is no problem in diagnosis.
So, in a situation where there is M-band and bone marrow is seemingly normal, I think one has been very rightly elaborated by Professor Singh that immunohistochemistry may tell the answer. Second is, it could be because of extramedullary plasma cytoma.
Yes, that's
So in that case, one must go for low-dose CT scan or MRI.
Yes.
Because those would be secreting M-band, bone marrow is seemingly normal.
Sir, there is one thing more, sir, that we have an IgM multiple myeloma also.
Yes.
And there we will not be able to differentiate it from Waldenstrom's because that is also, it has IgM positive and this is also IgM positive. I believe in such cases, MYD88L265 mutation would be helpful because in multiple myeloma cases will never be MYD88L265.
You are right.
You're right, but
MYD88 is
IgM
a
myeloma
mutation
first.
of Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia. If you have the facilities, nothing like it.
Sir, IgM myeloma would be there with clinical features of myeloma. If the CRAP criteria is there and IgM, then it is IgM myeloma. Our question is when CRAP criteria is negative and what to do with
Only
it. Then
then.
yes, MYD88 would help out. Yes.
So, from the clinician's perspective, such complex and complicated morphological correlations are not required so far management is concerned. Madam has asked so many questions, I hardly remember. Let me try to memorize and answer. Let me come to the last question. That if it's a MGUS, there is no treatment is required. It's only wait
No
and
treatment,
watch.
yes, sir.
And second, you ask the relevance of serum-free light ratio. The serum-free light, so serum-free light ratio is one of the most important factor. You have to follow it not only for the diagnosis, in monitoring.
Yes.
Even if people have gone beyond also. So it can go up to say 10 to per 2 cells. Even you can go beyond molecular, say MRD level also.
Yes, we are
now
doing
it's
the
a
MRD.
newer concept also. You can go beyond that also. So whatever may be some publications, some come. FLC is one of the most important relevant factor you have to follow. Third point is that what about the patchiness and comparing these lymphocyte variants, others, morphological. We don't look at all these nitty-gritties of the morphology while deciding the patient's management and even my follow-up also. So what is my humble submission even with this Professor Singh and Professor Basu is that the hematopathologist should give their finding. It's the clinician judgment to decide what is the stage and what is the risk category and whether the patient needs the management or not. And if you look at the involvement of the marrow in multiple myeloma, it can be very patchy, it can be very non-homogeneous also. You can find the florid features of the myeloma with the, even 2% of the blast cells also. Even with the trypan biopsy also, you can't go for trypan biopsy from 4 sides. It's very, very difficult. So at times, myeloma is very non-homogeneous and very patchy also. So you have to consider other factors like CRAP criteria, new myeloma defining events, MRA finding. Then you can take a decision. Suppose one picture is lacking, does not fit with your criteria for diagnosis. If you have an overwhelming presence of the other myeloma characteristics, the clinicians will jolly well and you can go statewide for the management is concerned. Similar, so for the risk stratification is concerned, I will suggest you can look for the International Myeloma Working Group, latest one. They have simplified, they have classified so for diagnosis, risk category, where you have to go for the management. That's very, very, very clear enough. So going for this nitty-gritty, that morphological correlation, okay, you can go for the research, you can corroborate, but these are not essential for the management of patients concerned in most of the cases.
I may disagree with Professor Jenna on this point. We have a case of lymphoma involving the bone marrow with the secretion of various globulins and with an M spike. It is lymphoma. It is not myeloma. Second is we have a case of Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia, again sheets of lymphocytes with M spike. Third is we have a case of lymphocytic variant of multiple myeloma, looking like lymphocytes, again with M-spike. And fourthly, we have a case of multiple myeloma with M-spike. I don't think it should be, we should say that these are all multiple myelomas and treat them as multiple myelomas. So it is a pathologist who will look at the lymphocyte morphology, who will look at the accompanying plasma cells, do immunohistochemistry and demonstrate whether they are CD138 positive plasma cells with different morphologies or they are basically lymphocyte and the patient is a lymphocyte with myeloma. So the morphology nitty-gritty will guide you. Another thing is, if you want to do cytogenetic markers for confirmation of diagnosis like mid-88 for Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia or cytogenetics, our patients cannot afford all the 20 mutations. We have to tell the clinician, yes, I think it is a case of Waldenstrom, so you do only mid-88. If I say that it is lymphocytic variant of multiple myeloma, then I'll say you do only deletion P and these 3 investigations. If I say that it is lymphocytic variant, I will not ask him to do 20 mutations, I will say only T1114. So the morphology, you cannot diagnose a myeloma or a related disorder like Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia just by clinical appearance. Both of them have to be corroborated with each other for a final treatment for the patient. Yes, please.
You have given a beautiful example where it do. I can cite 10 examples where the nitty-gritty of the morphology is not required. Let me give an example. A 70-year-old male has come with a severe bone pain. He is having anemia. There is a multiple fracture of the spines. You find the fluid osteolytic deficiency. M-band is IgG. Serum FLC is 40. And the bone marrow picture shows marrow cells are more than say, 20% or 30% with abnormal. So there are innumerable cases where there are classic myeloma which fits the clinical spectrum or the spectrum of the presentation. Yes, I do agree with you. There are certain percent of the cases where you do require all these nitty-gritties for that. But for majority of the patients, even more than I can tell you, more than 90% of patients also, you don't require all these nitty-gritties. We don't look at this. If there is any controversy in a setting up when you want to differentiate between lymphoma or the other lymphoproliferative disorders where M-band positiveness has been well appreciated, has been detected, yes, you can go for the immunohistochemistry and others in controversial, in doubtful, or in borderline cases, not in all cases.
I may again differ with Dr. Jain.
Yes, let me, so I would differ with Dr. Jena because it is an academic pursuit. We are 90% of the cases, it doesn't matter. I don't give a damn whether it's myeloma, right? But when I am training my postgraduates in pathology, I will need to tell them about how to identify a reactive from a normal plus. That's the first point in diagnosis, isn't it? You would agree with that. That's one. Second, if you look at the point there, just these points are important. Look at the morphology, look at the percentage, look at where there is fibrosis. Patients with myeloma with fibrosis, we have documented have poorer prognosis. Needs support when they are being treated for myeloma. Their recovery is weaker. So certain points in morphology, I would not call them nitty-gritty, I would call them very important. Period. Yeah, please. No, it's not research, it is patient related. It is right time patient related, sir. Please, you would have to realize that.
Dr. Basu, the importance of training and having knowledge of morphology cannot be underscored.
Yes.
Because these are very important in contentious cases. If clinical picture is very much clear, that's fine. We go for treatment. But if clinical picture is not very clear,
clinical picture is fine,
then,
we probably need
then
not
there
do
is
a
need
marrow.
for this. So it cannot be underestimated, like the knowledge and skill of morphology.
Yes, please.
Dr. Neha Singh from TMC Varanasi, currently posted in Actric, Mumbai. I just want to add a few points with all humility, considering the discussions of both the sides, in Tata, what we do is we do immunophenotyping in all the diagnostic cases as well as for MRD it is used. And we use a combination of 20, 138, 38 along with 319, 229 for gating the plasma cells, and we use aberrant markers like 56, 117, 28, 44, etc. to find out how many clonal plasma cells and aberrant plasma cells are there. So in cases where you are discussing a lymphoplasmacytic, the problem is due to the morphology, I think we can take the help of immunophenotyping.
Absolutely.
Because clonal B cells and clonal plasma cells, if you have two clonal populations, then it has to be an LPL. So I think in Tata, in all cases we are doing, yes, if you get a morphology, pay 40% plasma cells on immunophenotyping, they reduce to as much as 7 to 8, but they are clonal. And if you have two populations, even a 1% small clone of clonal B cells, it solves the case. So I think in all such cases, in routine cases, there won't be a problem. It's just for documentation. But in cases where we are struggling, whether morphology is important or clinical acumen has to be trusted, I think we can go for a middle way, that is immunophenotype.
Absolutely.
See, I'll briefly give one example. 2 years back, I had a patient at Bangalore, pancytopenia, Russian lady, came for treatment, and diagnosis was not made by various people. Ultimately, the biopsy came to us because the bone marrow was a dry tap, and the bone marrow biopsy showed extensive fibrosis. Inside the fibrosis, there were blast cells. Now, we also tried about 20 markers, immunohistochemistry. We could not come to a conclusion. They were typical blast cells, large, prominent nucleoli. Ultimately, I did CD138. Each cell was positive, and then we did kappa lambda. Now, she deteriorated. These plasma-blastic type of morphology, they are just like blast what Basu had shown you. It is typical blast, and you cannot say that it is not a blast. So we may be misled by a blastic appearance, and these are the cases which have the worst prognosis. So we have to always keep in mind that it could be a plasma cell morphology, it could be immature, or it could be a plasma blastic. And the plasma blastic does have a very poor prognosis. Any other comment? Yes, please.
Because,
Yes, Dr. Tripathi.
did you have any information about globulin in that patient? Like, did she have high protein or?
See, later, once we told them this is a case of
Then they-
myeloma,
Yeah.
in that case we found it was non-secreting myeloma,
Okay.
because it was
Plasma
plasma
blastic can
and
be
most of the
non-secreting.
plasma blastic ones
Are non-secreting.
may be non-secreting.
Sir, I think we can close the section.
No, there was one question at the back. Yes, please.
So we are running short of time, sir.
I'll cut down my talk, please.
One second. There's someone there.
I'm not aware of.
I'm not aware.
Not as yet, which is being used routinely, maybe for research purposes. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity to ask a question. And thank you, sir, for such a wonderful lecture. My question is a bit separate from multiple myeloma, but it involves plasma cells. So I'm doing my residency in a pediatric institute, and I come across a lot of post-chemotherapy pediatric marrows of children of AML. So what I have observed in 5 to 6 cases now, which I have come across, is there's a lot of plasmacytosis, reactive plasmacytosis post-chemotherapy in aspirates and biopsies of children as young as 3 to 4 years on AML. So I read a few books, and it is mentioned that yes, we can get it, but what I wanted to know is there any prognostic significance of this kind of appearance of a post-chemotherapy pediatric marrow? Because as far as adult cases are concerned, in my 1-year experience of adult bone marrows, I did not come through so many cases with reactive plasmacytosis. So, sir, is there any significance of this finding in a post-chemotherapy marrow?
See, in these cases, what happens is you give chemotherapy for a particular disease.
Yes.
The leukemic or the lymphoma cells, they disappear. Of all the cells present in the marrow, plasma cells are the most resistant ones. They survive. So you will always find in any post-chemotherapy marrow good number of plasma cells. Earlier they were hidden by the various other cells. Now what has happened is the other cells have disappeared, so plasma cells are very, very evident and they are rather prominent. That's it.
So they don't have any
No
prognostic
significance.
features.
No.
Significance.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you. We close this session. Thank you, Dr. Basu, for giving a nice presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, sir, for this illuminating talk. I now request Professor Devdatta Basu to honor Professor Tejinder Singh, sir. And now request Professor Tejinder Singh, sir, to honor Professor Devdatta.